Dr. Eleanor Drage, the host of the Good Robot podcast. Join me as I ask the experts, what is good technology? Is it even possible? And how can feminism and other justice-seeking movements help us work towards it? If you want to learn more about today's topic, there's a full transcript of the episode at thegoodrobot.co.uk, along with an especially curated reading list by every guest. I love hearing from listeners, so feel free to reach out on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, or through my Cambridge email address. And don't forget to leave a review on whichever platform you're listening from. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode.
In this episode, we talk to Terresa Hardaway, an associate professor at the University of Minnesota's College of Design and the creative director of Blackbird Revolt, a social justice-based design studio. We explore what racialized design is and how to identify it, why positionality matters for designers, why curiosity is the foundation of love and connection, and what running an abolitionist design studio looks like in practice. We hope you enjoy the show. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's really a delight to have you on the podcast. So just to kick us off, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what brings you to the topics of race, feminism, gender, and technology, and specifically design?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. I am an associate professor of graphic design at the University of Minnesota. I also own an abolitionist design studio called Blackbird Revolt. We do everything from print to web to video, audio production, and fabrication, and all of that with a lens in social justice. I also am the owner of Black Garnet Books. Which is like really about narratives for uplifting narratives for people of color. And I would say that my work brings me to the intersection of design and technology, specifically around the intersections of race and gender and sexuality, really at the beginning just because of my own identities and how that showed up in my work and also in my own design outcomes. And so being able to create spaces that people can comfortably design for people with identities that have been marginalized by systems of oppression has been really important to me. And so that is an intersection that I find in all of the work that I do.
So what is good design? Is it even possible? And how can feminism help us work towards it?
That's a really good question. I think if I'm thinking about intersectional feminism, working towards creating a design outcome that supports all of our communities, I think that's absolutely possible. Folks have to be comfortable talking about the issues that affect women and femmes and non-binary folks and folks who, again, have been oppressed by these systems to be able to then create outcomes for them. I always talk about the example of the TV remote, and when that was first created, it was created because someone had a disability. And I can't remember the last time that I ever went up to the TV to turn the channel on something. And I think that is really indicative of the fact that when you are designing for people who have marginalized identities, when you're designing for folks who are affected by these systems in the worst ways, that when you design for them, it benefits all of us. And so that's the lens that I take on when I'm thinking about creating design outcomes for women and for femmes, and to think about that specific identity and how that is marginalized, and then apply that in a way that obviously will affect all of our communities and in very positive ways.
Absolutely. And I love the way that you emphasize that these kinds of changes in design or these initiatives really do benefit everyone, even as they're specifically directed towards the needs of a community that maybe has been marginalized in the design process or hasn't been recognized as having different kinds of needs. And I wanted to ask you specifically about race and design, because I think that this is a conversation that has really been growing over the past few years about how our racial and our ethnic backgrounds and experiences can really shape the way we interact with products in the world. So to give an example, something that was always a conversation in my family, my Chinese side of the family, was that if you wear glasses like I do, a lot of glasses really don't fit a lot of people with sort of different kinds of, broadly speaking, East Asian facial profiles. So they might be having a lower nose bridge or higher cheekbones. And of course, you can have that stuff if you're not East Asian, but it tends to be a little bit more common if you are. And so you end up with the sad kind of sliding glasses effect, which is your glasses will never stay properly on your nose. And I feel like it's been really encouraging in the last few years, seeing a bit more of a conversation about this with designers saying, actually, we're going to start trying to design glasses that fit people's faces better. But until I saw those designers making these different kinds of glasses, I never even thought there could be a solution to that. I just thought we were sort of doomed to the sliding glasses effect. And this is, such a tiny thing in the big scheme of things, but it can really cause all these little frictions and inconveniences in your everyday life. And so when Eleanor and I saw all the incredible work you were doing on recognizing how race shapes design, but also trying to do anti-racist design, we were just really inspired and thought that this was fantastic work. So I want to start with this bigger question of what exactly is racialized design? How do you define it? And how can people identify it when they're moving through the world?
Yeah, you said a mouthful. So I think that when you're trying to identify racialized design, we first have to understand what the concept of race is and then how that perpetuates into a system called racism, and then understand that racialized design is just a product of the environment. We're always designing in the community that we exist. And so we're either trying to change what that outcome is, or we are just perpetuating the system that already exists. And so oftentimes that means we are perpetuating racism, sexism, all kinds of isms. And so when I think about trying to identify racialized design, I like go all the way into like a very theoretical sort of understanding about it, because racism, the foundation of that is anti-blackness. It is capitalism, is using folks' bodies and talents and their personas, their experiences for commodification. And so when we think about race in that way as to be this like very toxic kind of, like, I want to say like soul sucking even, but like really stealing from our communities, we can then begin to see how racism affects what we design, what we put out there into the world. I would say design, just in general, is something is about artifacts, it's about systems, and it's about experiences, which is how um, myself and my colleague Lisa Mercer define it in our book Racism Untaught. And so if you think about those three areas of design, it's very easy then to be able to point out how are artifacts racialized. Like I'm walking into a grocery store, and I'm seeing packaging that perpetuates an anti-Black, phenotype. How is that then influencing my idea and understanding about what that product is and where does that come from? It's like I can almost point everything back to slavery. That's, an example of an artifact. Or I think about, even you were talking about like glasses just now. And so I think the example that I always pull out, I think about artifacts, is like who's designing the readers for when you're trying to get paper towels or you're trying to get soap, because oftentimes that isn't read when you have more high melanin in your skin tone. So like when you are darker skinned, you are oftentimes not getting read when you're trying to like get paper towels. And it's because the folks who are doing the testing, that who are doing the designing of that item, don't have dark skin. And so that is not, it's not like people were intentionally thinking, we don't want Black people to use paper towels. But it is quite literally just the effect of the system being created in the way that it is, that college is more accessible for folks who have more generational wealth, and a lot likely that is not going to be Black folks, and so likely they are not going to have this type of education to be able to get this type of job. And so it's multi-layered, multifaceted, a very racialized system that then perpetuates these artifacts that are indeed racialized because they are living in the system. And so we all have agency to be able to shift and change some of those things. But I would definitely say it's like racialized design is just a product of the racist system in which we are living. It's a product of capitalism. It's a product of exploitation of Black and brown people.
Really glad you talked about capitalism explicitly, because it's often detached from these conversations, and it's really great to have a reminder of kind of the basis of where a lot of these problems come from. There's some really cool work in design trying to get designers to think about their positionality and how it relates to their work. And I know that you do some awesome stuff on this. So how do you encourage designers to engage with their position within society and history and culture?
I love talking about positionality. I think it is the first step, but it's like one of those steps that if you looked at like a chart, like it just continues on, because you should constantly always be trying to learn about yourself. I love doing like those self-assessments and like all those things. And there's ones that are more social justice leaning as well. But like all of the assessments, I'm like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna learn all about my birth chart. Like I'm gonna learn about all of the things and the ways in which I show up, because we know that when you are designing, you are creating based off of your lens and your experience. So if you're not constantly opening that up and not constantly questioning, oh, how am I showing up in this space? Okay, I'm a researcher. How am I coming into the community? How am I building trust? how am I coming off even as an academic? Am I coming in here and I'm saying, oh no, call me Dr. So and so? Like, am I really relating and building, at the speed of trust that I would like to? And so if you are not constantly dissecting who you are not self-aware enough to build community in the ways that we need to create design that's going to help all of us. And so for me, positionality is like the first step in understanding who we are and then how that is going to affect your design outcomes. And then it's like once you begin to find out who you are, you can begin to shift how you show up in community, what your values are, what are the things that you're passionate about, the things that you are constantly in the forefront of your mind. As somebody who has, anxiety, depression. I don't have a physical disability. And so because I do this work, it's at the forefront of my mind to be like, okay, how is so and so getting across here? And I think sometimes we get little hints of this when we have to we're like carrying groceries and we don't have any hands, or we're carrying a wagon or we're like something like that where we actually need accessible doors and things like that. And so sometimes I'm annoyed, but can you imagine someone who has to walk through their whole life in that way? And so then you begin to have these things at the forefront of your mind. So I feel like when you begin to investigate your own position, you then start to investigate other people's positions because of how you're showing up. And then you begin to think about design in ways that affect not just you. And I think we are socialized to think in an individualistic way. We're socialized to only think about ourselves. And as designers with agency to be able to create things that are going to affect the masses, we have a responsibility and ethical duty to be able to create things that are not just for us, not just for people in a certain economic level, and educational level even. And so it's really important that we're investigating ourselves, and that will bring us to a curiosity, I feel like, about other people and their experiences and how we can begin to either dismantle, disrupt, and destroy systems of oppression that are affecting their lived experiences.
I really like the way that you emphasize that positionality, which I think sometimes is interpreted kind of, I think, quite wrongly or quite, insensitively as being very self-obsessive or being about looking into yourself. I like the way that you frame it as no, this is a crucial form of self-awareness that then allows you to connect with others. It's not about foregrounding yourself and kind of taking a lot of space in this way, but about saying how do I acknowledge the way that I move through the world and how that is super different from other people's. So I think you're really kind of blowing this myth of the invisible designer out of the water.
Yeah, and just to add on to this idea about positionality, because I've heard this before, people are like, "Oh, that feels like self-centered." But as someone who has been in my therapy journey since 2019, it's like therapy makes you be curious about yourself, and I think curiosity is one of the foundational pieces of love. And it's like when you love someone, platonically, romantically, you are constantly curious about them. You want to know about them. You want to know who they are. And so if you're not even curious about yourself, you don't even love yourself. How can you love community and how can you design for community? How can you create anything if you don't even love who it is that you're creating this for and with? And so I think the discovery of positionality that's one of the most important pieces of being just a great citizen in this world, but especially a designer who is creating for the world.
Absolutely. And I really love that because how can we value in academia? There's such a value of this very sort of hyper masculized, super disengaged kind of curiosity, this intellectual curiosity of I'm going to go break whatever boundaries, ethical included, to try and, make this new discovery. And yet there's so little relational curiosity. And I really like the way you're pivoting that towards saying we need to be curious about ourselves and each other so that we can build this better world through design. And that doesn't mean we can't enjoy all the intellectual curiosity that comes with that. I'm sure all of us here, we love our work, but it has to be grounded in that sort of meaningful unity with one another. I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about now some of the design work that you've been doing. You have, such an amazing portfolio of work, and you've written a lot and kind of created a lot of projects which are all about amplifying Black voices through design. And so we'd love to hear more in particular about one of your design projects, which is a font that you call the Stop Killing Black People font. So could you tell us a little bit more about this project and the process of designing it?
Yeah. So again, in trying to discover myself and being here in Minneapolis and really trying to deal with the juxtaposition of creating work for Black liberation, understanding that Black people are constantly under attack. And I was trying to just process all of the violence that was happening in my community towards my community. And I just started jotting down phrases that I heard when I was at protests. And I think my point to saying that specifically is that like the most impactful community work is going to happen when you're just in community. And it's not, I didn't go on to Google and try to find what is the top protest sayings, things like that. I was actually there. I was there. I was with people. I was yelling it out, screaming it out, had it on the cardboard signs like everybody else. Like I was there. And it was only in that moment that I was able then to like figure out how to actually take some of that type and put it out into the world in a more tangible way because I was there at those community gatherings. And so I was just trying to process what was going on. And so I started just like writing down. I do really love hand lettering. So I just started sketching those things out and just writing out these phrases as a way to process. And at a protest one day, it was in Minnesota. I can't remember, it was like April or something. And this might happen with other cities, but there's a weather change that happens. Like you can go out in the morning and you're wearing a coat. And then in the afternoon, you're like, oh my God, I'm like hot, I'm sweating, And then by the time just like a couple hours pass, you need to put that coat back on. So oftentimes when you have a protest and it starts at 5 o'clock, it's hot, sun's out, blah, blah. But then by the time it's like getting 7, 8 o'clock, the curfew's coming on, they're about to do whatever. It's cold again. And so people were freezing. So we were bringing out supplies and all that. And then, of course, it like randomly start to snow or rain. And so cardboard signs would melt. The media was there, which was great because that's why we wanted to get the message out. But the media was there. And then like you'd had these melted signs. Like nobody even knew what was happening in the photos. So I thought to myself, like, what if I take the type that I created and just like get a ton of stuff printed and pass it out to community? And that's what I did. We raised like 30,000 grassroots fundraising, literally sending out Venmos, sending out Cash Apps. And we got people to donate so that we could get all these things printed. So we handed out thousands of hoodies that said "Stop Killing Black People" on it. And for us, it isn't just about, oh, let's have this type and let folks see that we're all together. Like that unification is really important for community. Media knows exactly what it is that we're fighting for, being able to take a photo of what we had on our shirts. But then also, it's less likely for us to be targeted by police if we're all looking the same. What are you going to say? It was a person there who had a "Stop Killing Black People" hoodie on. Okay, that's hundreds of people out there with that hoodie on. And so it was a really multi-layered way of solving this problem of safety and messaging and unifying community. And that was a really cool thing to see. So we printed it on hoodies and on t-shirts and on posters that are not posters, but signs, like the yard signs that were like really durable in all kinds of weather. And we printed all kinds of sayings, again, sayings that I heard, all power people, all the things that I heard as we were chanting and protesting outside. That's how that project came about, and then how it showed up in a tangible way. And then designers like y'all were asking me like, hey, how can I use this type? I need to be able to create our own stuff because we have this happening in this city. And so I ended up making a style guide for it and putting it online, and folks can access and download that and use it for their abolitionist purposes.
Yeah, I saw that. It's really cool. I love that it's kind of open source, really accessible. And then you can see it live all these different lives and people take it out into the world and make incredible things from it. As you've said, you're the creative director of Blackbird Revolt. It specifically defines itself as abolitionist and social justice based as a creative studio, which is really cool. And so it does beautiful and liberatory design work. Can you give us some examples of some other really cool products that you've come up with and how in particular you actively realize this vision of abolition in the things that you make?
Yeah, so I'll start first by talking about like our company policies. I think when we think abolition, we're also very much socialist aligned. So it's like all of our full-time employees make the same rate. We have 100% health care. We have a 4-day work week. We have 20 holiday and rest days. And we really try to center who everyone is and how they show up and really try to work with folks to know that they are valued. And I think the people who really understand what it means to have those things that I just named off have worked at really horrible places, and me being one of them. And so that's one of the things that like I think is a foundation for how Blackbird Revolt exists. I'll also say then the next step is in how we are in relationship with one another, really focusing on having our retreats or having days where we're really connecting, having our monthly sessions where we're literally just checking in with each other. We're not talking about work. And those are really important things to us, building that community and building that trust. And then I would say outside of that, who are we working with? What jobs are we saying yes to? Who are we bringing into the fold of Blackbird Revolt? Who can put their name? Who can put Blackbird Revolt's name as something that, we did? is really important to us. We work with quite a bit with grassroots organizations, nonprofit organizations, agencies, and other business entities and government agencies who are working towards the things that we value. So it's going to be a lot of work around Black liberation. It's going to be a lot of work around Indigenous sovereignty. It's going to be a lot of work around queer identity. It's going to be a lot of work around women and femme and sexuality. It's going to be quite a bit on the disability and things that we find need more amplification and need more beautiful design. Oftentimes we are working with folks who like are doing some really great work, but it's like they're busy doing the work and they come to us to help them in molding and shaping their sort of brand so that they can get more funding or they can get more involvement or get folks who's like, oh, that teacher is cool. I want to join that organization. And so yeah, that's how we framing ourselves within our social justice ecosystem. It's like we're really storytellers. We are really telling the story of all these amazing people and then also being able to connect people across these intersections and bring our community closer together.
And it's so wonderful to hear kind of how you've integrated that kind of abolitionist ethos into the very structure of your company and of your organization, because I think, sadly, it's just simply not a given that organizations with a social justice focus are not sadly just as exploitative or just as draining for their employees. And I think many people who've worked in this kind of social justice space have had that kind of very disillusioning experience of saying, okay, everyone's here and they say we're working towards this goal, but like at what cost and what is this doing to every individual in this organization? And so, it's really wonderful to hear how it's kind of starting, kind of flowing from the bottom up and then out into all the wonderful kind of projects and designs that you're working on. And then finally, I heard that your company now has a sister company called Black Garnet Books, which sounds incredibly exciting. So what is Black Garnet Books? What is its goal? And how does this kind of, relate to your work as a designer?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'm trying to process all of them. I think Black Garnet Books, I have never been like, oh, I'm going to be a bookstore owner. That's never been like some type of dream of mine. But I have said that I am going to be an abolitionist. And when the opportunity arose, my friend and fellow community organizer Dion Sims approached me with this, I was like, okay, it makes sense that it's an abolitionist bookstore. It makes sense. I'm an educator. Like that's a complete intersection right there. And then in store we sell only Black and brown authors and artists and authors and illustrators. And so all of that totally made sense to me. Again, in line with Blackbird Revolt, it's about storytelling. It's about making sure is spaces that amplify these voices. And then as someone who is a community organizer and I do quite a bit of very large scale events, being able to expand the events that happen at the bookstore is really important. Like we've done a lot of talking with my team about like a third space, a space where people can go and feel centered and feel like, okay, I don't have to pay for this. I can just enjoy and build community. And that is like a really huge piece of what we do. And so, yeah, it is a really exciting experience. I just acquired it back in November of 2024. And so just getting into this first year, it's been really exciting to grow the space and, just engage with community in really awesome ways. I think also it like expands our reach over to St. Paul. We're in Blackbird Revolt is in Minneapolis. And so having that sister company has just expanded our reach and, our principles and our values over to another city, our sister city. So that's been really awesome to see. And I'm just excited for it to continue to grow and flourish and curate more things and bring authors in and have, other events where community can enjoy themselves and really just, find some relaxation. They can work in that space. There's quite a few things that folks can do and ways that they can engage with us. So it's been a really fun experience, and I think it'll continue to be fun for quite some time.
Bookstores are just really soothing venues. They're the ideal place for people to gather and listen. And I think the books absorb the sound in a nice way as well. So it's always like a pleasant acoustic.
Yeah.
Very envious and yeah, incredible work that you're doing. Thank you
Yeah,
so
it's a
much. Yeah.
really cute store. I will say also like there's another connection with Blackbird is that when I design product, it could go right over there. So that is a really fun time, that I have. It's like it's like a side job to my side job, where I get to really just put our values out there. Like stop feeling Black people can just be, something that's found at the bookstore. So it's been pretty cool.
I'd love to come and visit. I'm desperate to come to the Twin Cities, and this will be my first port of call. Thank you so much for coming to join us on the podcast today. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
This episode was made possible thanks to Stiftung Mercator and the Leverhulme Trust. It was written and produced by me, Dr. Eleanor Drage, and the editor of this week's episode is credited in the episode's description. Thanks for listening.